You guys have questions ready? Yeah? So many. All right, welcome. Welcome to CHADev. It's good to be back in this capacity and not the one that Craig is in. So, here we are. These are our sponsors. They're the ones that pay for you to eat this lovely food. This food is from Cancu. You guys know that place? The magical Cancu. It's on Central over here, the gas station. Our man Chester out there. Thank you, Chester, if you're watching. You're probably not. You're probably working. But thank you, Chester back there. Go see Chester for some amazing chicken biscuits. I mean, you're eating them now. If you like them, go down there on a Friday morning or a Saturday morning and grab some. All right. Anyway, so next week we have Mr. Pell, Derek over here. He's going to give us a talk on Jupiter, right? Okay, so come out for that. We are still looking for speakers. Well, we're always looking for speakers, of course, but I think late June we've got a date open or two, and then certainly in July. So if you're thinking about giving a talk, come talk to me, and we'll work that out. Let's see. I believe you have an announcement, don't you, Joel? All right. Everybody give it up. Yeah, come on.
So I'm a developer at Code School, and we're currently looking for contractors to help implement our courses. So that work largely consists of writing tests that validate user-submitted code and then provide feedback. So depending on the course, you'd be writing anything from JavaScript, Ruby, PHP, .NET. So we're not looking for people who are proficient in all those languages, but people who are good at problem solving and enjoy learning. So if you're interested, come find me afterwards. I can kind of show you what it looks like. I have a demo set up, and we can get more details out to you.
Thank you much. Anybody else want to make an announcement before we kick this off? All right, without further ado, everybody give it up for Craig.
Thank you. Oh, wow, mic's already on. That's fantastic. My name's Craig Lyons. I'm here to talk to you about an app that I've been building called StreamVault.io. I'm calling this a mid-mortem. It's not a real thing, but it's not a post-mortem because the project isn't done or dead. So it's a mid-mortem. It's in progress. And it's an anti-social networking app. It's a lot of fun. I'm going to tell you all about that. So about me, I'm a developer at Carbon 5. I work here in the building. We're on the 8th floor for now, soon to be the 9th. I've been here in Chattanooga about 7 months now, and it's rad. My background is in CSE. When I was getting my education, I did my co-ops at Intel in Boston, doing CPU architecture verification and software. Super fun, assembly, super low level. After that, I went to Fidelity Investments. I did OCR image recognition stuff that was terribly, terribly boring. I don't recommend it, at least not there. And then I was lead developer at the Milken Institute in Los Angeles, along with all their other profit and nonprofit entities. Most recently, I was at CrushPath in San Francisco. It's kind of a startup. It was a startup / is a startup. They've gone through some serious changes. So I am stoked to be with Carbon 5. I'm stoked to be here. I'm also a husband, a father. I've got 2 young boys. And I joke that I'm a recovering professional musician. That's what brought me out to LA in the first place. I'd like to point out that I am not a professional public speaker, so please bear with me. So why build StreamVault? When I first started at Carbon 5, I wanted a real project to level up all of my tech and process, a lot of things that are used at Carbon 5. And a lot of that stuff I had done at CrushPath in San Francisco, but it was already in place when I got there. So I kind of showed up and used the stuff that was there. In my opinion, you learn more when you bang your head against a wall and you figure it out and you build it yourself and you see how it all works together. Another reason, in bold letters, because Kanye West. I mean, he's hilarious, right? So we need to have some sort of a project. So I'll just tell you the inspiration. I was reading Mashable one morning, and they posted a story about a series of tweets that he had put out there. And they were hilarious, but they were already deleted by the time we would have looked at them. So Mashable took a screenshot and said, here's your article. So I thought, you know what, there should be a better way to save these things permanently, group them together, and share them socially. I was kind of surprised that nothing really good existed to fill that purpose. Other reasons, the internet gives people a false sense of security. You click a button that says delete, you think you're deleting your stuff, there's no way that's true. We know that, a lot of people don't know that. And I also think that people are too cavalier with the things they say on social media. You feel comfortable saying things that you wouldn't actually say in person. So I feel like there should be something that holds people to their word a little bit better. This is real stuff. So what does it do? Number one, you log in using three-legged OAuth. I'll go more into all this stuff later. This is a very broad, quick overview. Then you can create a vault. So you give it a title. You point it at any handle you want. It can be anybody. It can be your buddy, your husband or wife. It could be a celebrity, whatever. And then you can show all the latest tweets from these people. And then you can pick and choose arbitrarily and start forming them into a stream of consciousness. And then you click Create Vault, and you keep it forever, regardless of whether or not it's deleted. Obviously, you have to have the ability to share your vault. So you can tweet it, you can send it out on Facebook, you can copy a link to it, so you can email it or text it, and you can deactivate it. I should point out, it does not say delete. It says deactivate, because it doesn't actually delete anything. You can view your vault, and UX is a huge part of this app, even though it's very simple. It's grouped by handle, which I'll talk about more later, sorted by recency, and you can filter. So if you've got 1,000 vaults, you can drill down and find a specific handle that you're looking for. And I also really wanted there to be a search feature. So using Elasticsearch, I built in fuzzy and partial searching, so you can find vaults from all the way across the app, no matter who vaulted it. And that'll search on the title of the vault, the Twitter handle it was pointed at, and the text inside the vault. The vaulter is anonymous for now. I'm kind of back and forth on this as to whether or not you should be able to see who created the vault. Because what if you want to do it kind of like, oh, I saw, what you said, but I don't want people to know that I created this vault. So it's anonymous for now in the somewhat nefarious spirit of the app. I'm going to give this one a minute here. Yeah? Okay. So it's a medium-sized project. It's kind of on the small side. 167 commits as of today. I started development at a Carbon 5 hack night, which is here in the building. I should point out this is not a Carbon 5 project. Don't put the blame on this app. On Carbon 5, that's not right. In total, it's about 4 months of sporadic evenings and weekends. As I said, I've got 2 small boys, so sporadic is the right word here. So I want to talk about my approach a little bit. I wanted to treat this as a real client project, as though it had a full team. So I use some of the modern agile practices that we use at Carbon 5. This top one is actually a little bit different. I wanted to prototype first, so I could see if the thing that I wanted to do was actually possible. If I was going to hit any technical roadblocks that would prevent me from getting through it. And once I had that critical mass of stuff that said, hey, you know what, this is actually going to work, then I move on to an MVP, which is a minimum viable product that I can put out there for the world to see. So we iterate, do continuous delivery. That's both on the prototype phase and the MVP phase. And I used Pivotal Tracker, which does velocity tracking. Anybody here use Pivotal Tracker? So we've got a few. It's super cool. It's kind of like Trello, except it's more organized towards maintaining projects. And you create stories, which are features or bugs or chores. And you give these things estimates of complexity so that it can start to figure out what you're probably going to get done by a certain point in time. It can be really handy for doing those kinds of estimates. And who here was at Brett's Sprint Talk last week? Yeah, so that was super cool. We've also been reading the Sprint book at Carbon 5. And that's all pretty recent for me. So I didn't do a formal sprint process, but I found myself doing a lot of these sprint-like things while building this app. For example, the prototyping is huge. You need to know that what you're building actually makes sense and you don't waste time or money. TD-ish-D. Is it test-driven development? Well, kind of, sort of. I'll explain more about that later. Here's a quick list of the tech. I'll end up going into a lot of this stuff individually, so I'm just going to gloss over it. There's a bootstrapping framework for building apps at Carbon 5 called Raygun. It's open source. You can go and use it. And it basically bakes in things like Ruby on Rails, Postgres, Bootstrap for your CSS framework, Slim for your front-end templating engine, and RSpec and Capybara for testing. It does some more things besides that, but that's the basic idea. Outside of Raygun, I needed OAuth, obviously, with this kind of tight integration with Twitter. I needed a Twitter API. There's a big surprise. I use Sinatra in a way that I think is pretty cool. Redis and Sidekick kind of go together, but I also use Redis independently, and Elasticsearch, like I mentioned. And Bitbucket, yes, seriously, Bitbucket, not GitHub. Why? As I mentioned, I used to be a professional musician, which means there were times when I was extremely poor, and private repos on Bitbucket are free. So I got familiar with Bitbucket, and it turns out Atlassian is fighting that good fight, and they just rolled out pipelines about a week ago. I'll go into that later too. Heroku for now. Heroku is rad. Really easy way to get DevOps out of the picture, at least temporarily, to some extent, and Pivotal Tracker. This is, I think, is my favorite one. It's just the worst. It's the worst. So I'm going to talk about my development of this app. And the way I decided to do this is go through my commit messages. So it's in sequential order, basically how I built the app. So I can show you what problems I hit and how I got around them as I was actually developing this thing. So I started with auth. And I used Devise and OmniAuth for authentication. You know, there's a great debate when to use something off the shelf and when not to. In my opinion, security is pretty hardened. It's something that needs to be hardened. And odds are, if I tried to build something in a few weeks, it would fall short of what you can accomplish with a gem called Devise and OmniAuth, which is obviously used for authentication with a variety of providers. I custom built the authorization. So in Ruby, there's a gem called Pundit. And most of the time, I know other people would recommend not using something off the shelf for authorization, because usually that's so custom to your app that you end up fighting it more than it ends up helping you. So that's all hand-rolled here. I started with email and Twitter authentication. I eventually removed email and mocked that instead. That was a mistake. I regret it. And I wish I hadn't done it, because now I'm at the point where I have occasional contributions from other developers, and I have to jump through hoops in order to get them to be able to log in, because you have to use Twitter. It's the only way to log in. So Twitter API. I have a lot of experience with the streaming API. I've built a couple really cool apps that use the streaming API. Anybody used it here? Cool. So basically, the short version of it is you set up a pipe between you and Twitter with a curated list of either handles or things that represent handles, and they will just shove tweets at you in real time over a socket. It's really robust. It's a service. It's not HTTP based, and I just kind of assumed this is the route it's going to go. Turns out Search API was the better tool for the job here. Search API is HTTP based. It's very simple. And yeah, I was kind of surprised, but it made the most sense for me here. And the biggest reason is that this three-legged OAuth, when you log in and you perform an action on StreamVault, like let's say you're creating a vault with a whole bunch of tweets, that ends up happening on your behalf, whatever your handle is. You are making that request to Twitter, not StreamVault. So we don't have any risk of getting rate limited by somebody else just going nuts and creating a ton of things. Search API made a lot of sense for that. And it was a lot easier to use, so that never hurts, right? So access token and secret, part one. So for the prototype, just the prototype, not even the MVP, I insecurely store this data directly on the user in the database. It's awful. It's terrible. You shouldn't do it. But again, I was just trying to see if it could work. So what I did is I went into my Pivotal Tracker project, and I added a bug report that said, hey, don't launch this thing until you've tightened this thing up, right? So this way I could move forward to other potential bottlenecks or problems, and I would make sure that this thing never got in the public with a gaping security hole in it. Prototype architecture is kind of straightforward. Are there MVC web app developers here? Yeah, so I built out the models, the associations, controllers, views, just kind of like baking the shell of the app and no UX at this point in time. It's just hard-coded data. At this point, it didn't make sense for me to spend any time or effort on UX. So the next major hurdle was Sidekick and Redis for actually performing these Twitter API actions. And Sidekick will go and perform an action. You can usually offload it to a different machine, and it can do a lot of work on the web app's behalf while the web app continues serving requests. So this is the shell. There's not much happening here, but again, it was a proof of concept to say, is this going to work? So I've got my Vault object, I find one, and I perform this action on behalf of the user. I made sure that the Sidekick background worker could actually perform actions on behalf of the user, and it worked. Great, moving on, because then I know I can extend that if I need to. Yep. Yes, you did. You certainly did. I had to model the tweets internally, because the whole point of the app is that I can grab these things and hang on to them permanently outside of Twitter. So I have a thing called a tweet. That can get confusing, but it's my own internal representation of what a tweet is. I did some user testing, and that showed that a lot of different people were going to want to tweet the same thing over and over in different vaults. So something particularly explosive or hilarious comes up, a bunch of people are going to vault that. That's another reason why I should have my own representation of a tweet, so that it can be associated and reused across different instances. I chose to save all of the entire raw tweet as JSON data, in addition to some other data. So tweet ID, tweeted at, text, and screen name. These are attributes of a tweet that I'm going to use all the time. I'm going to be showing these things. They're going to show up in search. I'm going to need them really frequently. But then there's this mountain of data that Twitter provides in JSON format. I mean, it's a lot of data. And it would be silly for me to go and search for those things that I need all the time, be really inefficient. So what I do is I pull out the things that I need frequently, and then I store the entire thing as a JSON object in my database. Should probably be JSONB, but it's more portable if you use straight JSON. If you switch databases, no big deal. Individual tweet selection, arguably the most important feature. So this is where you select, you can skip around, you just pick the ones you want completely arbitrarily, not supported by the Twitter search API. Small problem, turned out this was pretty easy to get around, because what you can do is provide pagination in your request. So you can say, hey, I want to start at page 2, which happens to be record 10, and get the next 40. So you can kind of misuse those attributes to perform this minimum and maximum range values. So if I get the first one you pick, the last one, grab all those tweets. Now I knew I could remove the ones you didn't select later, so I didn't build that at this point in time. So the proof of concept is done at this point. All the things that I was moderately concerned about, they all worked. So then I could move on to the MVP. I did incur some technical debt, particularly in testing, because I wrote 0 tests so far, which is a drag. But again, why waste the time writing the tests if the whole thing isn't going to work? That was my logic anyway. The same thing with deploying to production. So this would be a great time to deploy it to a production-like environment. Even if it's not on the public, at this point you need to see how it's going to operate in a production-like environment. Like I said, I use Heroku. So I should spin up these instances, figure out how much it's going to cost me, and start figuring out these things. And future deploys I'd be able to do kind of piecemeal as I built more features. But I didn't do this. I did not deploy to production, and I paid a price for it. So I should have set up like an acceptance or a testing environment that mirrors production exactly a lot sooner. Not until I get the table, though. That's right. That's right. That's wisdom. So I finally get to testing at this point. I feel it's worthwhile to go ahead and build out the tests. I used RSpec for unit tests, Capybara for feature tests, and SimpleCov. Has anybody done coverage in their tests? So this was a great way for me to get caught up on my tests. What it does is it looks at all the lines of code that you've written, and it tells you whether or not they are being tested when you run your test suite. Did this line of code get executed or not? Does it tell you if your tests are good? No, absolutely not. But you can make sure that you've tested at least the major components of your app. So you can say, I'm at a 75%. I don't really care about that 25%. All the major things at least have a test on them. So that got me caught up on TDD pretty fast. The rest of it could be TDD going forward. Twitter search API stubbing. So when I was at CrushPath, we used a gem called VCR. And what this is for is external requests. You don't want to go and hit twitter.com every time you run a test, especially if you have multiple developers, because you're going to overload it, you're going to get rate limited, and it's just a bad idea for a lot of reasons. So we use a gem called VCR. And VCR, in theory, is really cool. It records your outgoing request. You tell it to record. It says, OK, here's what you're requesting. Here's the response, and that is a cassette. And you tuck that away. So if that same request gets sent again, it just sends you the response from the cassette. Great in theory, but the problem is if anything changes in either the request or the response, the whole thing explodes, and you've got nothing. You have to create a new cassette. It was rough. So I wanted something better. So what I found was a way to use Sinatra to build, if you're not familiar with Sinatra, it's like a really super lightweight Ruby on Rails framework. You can handle requests and responses. Just think of it as a tiny web app. And our spec kicks that off when I run my test, spins it up, and then I send any request that goes to api.twitter.com into my Sinatra app, and it can handle the response, and I can send back whatever I want from it, because it's just a custom app. So here's an example. Right here, I kick it off. I stub the request. Any request that goes to api.twitter.com goes to fake Twitter, which is the thing that I built. And here's a little look at this changed since then. But here's a really basic pattern. If we get a request for user timeline, which is part of the search API, we run this method. We go to our fixtures, and we say, hey, you requested this type of thing. I'm going to send you back whatever it is. And in this case, I go and I look up a fixture that I've created, which is just JSON data, which exactly mimics what comes back from Twitter. So the way I do this is I actually go to Twitter, I get a response, and then I shove it in here, and then I change it however I want. The beauty of this is if I want to hit a different type of endpoint on Twitter, all I do is I go back and I add a new route to my Sinatra app. So Kanye thinks that we should talk about UX at this point and UI. I do too, Kanye. Waiting this long to start UX and UI is costly in refactor time because inevitably front-end changes are going to cause back-end changes. It almost always happens that way if there's significant changes. So in this case, I would say it was worth it. The production deploy, no. This, yes, because not only did I prevent myself from wasting time, but I asked for a lot of help with UX and UI because it's not my strong suit. And I would have felt horribly if I had wasted these people, if I wasted their time for an app that never made it out into the world. And in a real business world, that's money, right? You've spent a bunch of money on UX and UI for an app that never sees the light of day. So I paid some costs in terms of my own time because of this, but I think it was worth it in this case. So we went for a native app-like experience, specifically iOS, did mobile first. And at this point, it made sense to build out a bunch of the features. There were a whole bunch of UX features. This is one of the more interesting ones. So it was synchronous. You create a vault, and you get redirected back to your vault's index page where you see all the vaults that you've created, right? And the problem is, you've kicked off that creation to a sidekick worker that's going and performing a request all the way out to Twitter, all the way back, parsing through that data, getting the things you want, storing the blob. That's slow, a lot slower than hitting your vault's index page. So you'd have nothing there. You'd have to refresh your page to see your new vault. So I needed some kind of an asynchronous solution. Now again, this is just the MVP. So I need something that works. It doesn't necessarily have to be the best solution. But I want to get something up and out there that I can iterate on. So what I did was long polling. There are ups and downs to it. Sometimes it's fine. In this case, for now, it's fine. So now I had to introduce state to vaults. So when you create a vault in your controller, it sets a status flag that says the vault is filling. And then the client side, the browser, whoever's using the app, is continually hitting this endpoint saying, are you filling, are you filling, are you filling, yes, and shows a spinning loading graphic. And when that vault becomes ready, which means the Sidekick worker job is done and it's updated the status to say ready, then it says ready, and then it goes out to Twitter, gets the avatar, and shows the rest of the data. More features. So this is when I felt comfortable building in things that I knew they weren't going to be hard to build, but they would take time. So like filtering vaults, which I mentioned, deactivating, sharing, copy and paste the link. When I first started, I built copy to go ahead and shove it into your buffer on the OS, which was cool, but it didn't work on iOS. So I was like, well, maybe I should punt. What does Twitter do? And they pop a little thing up that you can copy and paste, and it works on all platforms. Fine. I started to work on efficiency improvements at this point, decrease the number of tweets that you could possibly get, things like that. And custom JavaScript validations. I highly, highly recommend this. Model validations provided by Rails are way too deep in the call stack. So you go through the process, you pick some tweets, only to find out you forgot to put in a title or something that's required. And then you get, you hit the page again, fresh, and you've lost all that stuff that you've done. So I spent the time to write custom JavaScript validations. I still kept the model stuff in place, but this way, if the user makes a mistake, it doesn't cost them anything. Took some time, worth the time. And I finally deployed, yes. This is way too long to wait, like I said. Service integrations were more difficult, and there were things that I didn't document, even though I wrote all the code. 4 months is kind of a long time, and I write a lot of code. So there are things that I had forgotten about that I had to go and read my code and figure out what I was doing. So this is a very, very strong argument to have an intermediate environment that mirrors production. The same OS if you can do it, the same exact thing if you can do it, because then future deploys are really easy. I'd like to point out that Kanye is very humble as well. And as promised, I come back to the access token in secret. So I ripped it out of the database. I added an encryption scheme as an environment variable. And the reason that I do that is so that it can be used by both the Sidekick worker job and the web app. Remember, sometimes those are even on different machines. So at this point, I encrypt the values, and I add them to the session at the time of login. So they're encrypted, they're there. And on vault creation, I pass all that stuff, encrypted, to the worker. So then the worker has everything it needs to be able to deconstruct this request and go perform this action on your behalf, all the way out to Twitter, back, finish its work, update the status. There was a lot of stuff to do with images. So if somebody tweets an image, it was Alex who pointed out that I should probably save this image, because if the tweet gets deleted, I save the data, but I don't have the image, right? So I used AWS S3 for this. Whenever I get an incoming tweet, I scan it for an image. If there's a media entity that's an image, I download it, which is temporary. On Heroku, everything is ephemeral. So your app restarts, you lose that data. So then I shove it up to an S3 bucket that belongs to StreamVault, and I update the internal tweet's image URL. So it thinks it's pointing out to this certain image. No longer, now it points to our copy of the image, and it's there permanently. More image fun. Retrieving avatar URLs from Twitter is expensive and risks rate limiting a client. So let's say you have 1,000 vaults that you've created. You go hit the page. Obviously, I should be paginating at this point, but let's say I'm not. You request a whole bunch of images, and you're making individual calls out to Twitter, which has the potential to get you rate limited because it has to do a lookup. So what I do, when you create a vault, I cache it on Redis for a day. I cache that image location. So if anybody else looks at that same image, they're going to get the cached copy. And this is shared app-wide. So when you get your list, you know that somebody else has already done it. This was an interesting bug. I need to look into it some more, but I think it's a bug in Twitter. If you request an avatar by handle, and size. So let's say I want the big image of Kanye West using his handle in the request URL. It results in a 302, which is a redirect. So then when you go and you resolve that redirect, it then points you to an actual image. The problem is, if you do this on a mobile device, Twitter says, hey, redirect everything to mobile.twitter.com. So here you can see I perform a curl, and I fake the user agent. So I pretend I'm an iPhone. And it says 302 found, but look at this location, mobile.twitter.com. And that's not resolvable. So the way I get around this is I do a server-side lookup. So I make a call into my own app that handles this properly. It says, here's the URL. It goes out to Twitter, makes the request for the redirect lookup, and says, hey, I'm not a mobile app. And so you get the actual image URL back. Analytics, worth the time investment to track usage from day one. This is really, really important in my opinion. The second the app hits the wild, I think it's really important that you're tracking everything that you can. I used a service called Segment.io. Any Segment users? Segment is rad, is it not? So it's an aggregation. You fire custom events in your server or on the client, and they can be whatever you want them to be. And then that event exists in Segment. From there, you can aggregate up to, I think they have like 100 different providers where you can send this event in such a way that they know what to do with it. So some of these are Heap, Customer I/O, and Google Analytics. These are the ones I'm using. So I don't actually put in any Google Analytics tracking code. I just do Segment, and then I say, I want these things, including Google Analytics, so I get that for free. Customer I/O does emailing stuff. It's overkill for what I need, but I wanted to learn it. Heap is rad. So Heap is really experiment-driven development related. Any Heap users, it's going to keep going down. So you can funnel your traffic, and you can start to see patterns of how people interact with your site. You can follow a particular group of users through a set of interactions all the way down to a call to action. And they store all of your data about that event from day one. So if you change your mind and you want to run a different experiment on that data, you can go and rewind it and replay it as though it were the beginning of time from your app. Like, what would this have done? So their interfaces are kind of nuts. So it'll point you back to your site. So this is just my Vault page. And I said, so I'm going to go to this. I'm going to click on this. And when I click this, it tells me 5 users did this, 83.3% within the past week. So you can start to see these crazy detailed behaviors of what people do. Sometimes I push the door close button on people running towards the elevator. I just need my own elevator sometimes. All right. This is important stuff. Elasticsearch. Elasticsearch is awesome. I know you use it. Who else? Elasticsearch. Yeah. So super important, because otherwise you're doing full text searches on your Postgres relational database, or whatever your relational database is, which is super slow. And your database is really busy. It has more important things to do. So Elasticsearch is great. It offloads that work into a separate instance. And the way it works, the really simple way it works, you install this thing, you pretend like it's a separate service, and you hit it. It has a REST API. So you create your indexes, and then you request your results. And it can handle things out of the box that would be pretty hard to build, like fuzzy matching, partial matching, result scoring. So you can set your thresholds and deem whatever you will to be significant. And like I said, it gives your web and DB servers a break. I'm using Bonsai with Heroku, which is fine. It just spins it up, and you can hit it. You can index it. It's fine. My initial strategy for indexing. So again, I've got the concept of a vault, which contains tweets, and then I've got a tweet, which contains all the data, right? So initially, I started saving the vault title and handle in an index, and then I saved just the text of the tweet in a separate index. This was not good, because a lot of times you would get duplicates. If it appeared in the text for the tweet, and it also appeared in the title for the vault, that's the same vault twice, and I'm only showing vaults. So then I have to do some server-side logic to tease those apart and figure out which one, throw out dupes. And then I'm doing work on the server, which is what I set out to avoid. So I refactored this to use a single index for vaults plus their nested tweets. So they're all saved as a single index, and then you can search on all those fields at once, and it gives you back a single vault. It's faster, less logic. I told you Bitbucket was doing something cool. So continuous integration is a good thing. CrushPath, we use CodeShip. At Carbon 5, most of the time we use Circle CI. And what this does is it basically handles deployment of your app. So you run your tests. If your tests pass, shoves it up to a server, acceptance or production. Additional external services can be bad. We've learned that they have problems of their own. It's a hard problem they're solving. So Bitbucket built this in themselves. And it works pretty similarly, where it just listens for pushes to a specific branch, or any branch if you're using source control. And at the time that it receives a push, it'll spin up an ephemeral test or deploy server. And you can choose any Docker image you want. You can build one. You can take one off the shelf. And it'll spin that up and run whatever you tell it to run, which, again, normally it's run your tests, see if they pass, deploy it if they do. So StreamVault was lucky enough to get beta access for Bitbucket pipelines. This is like a week ago that they launched this. They said Heroku is not supported. I didn't believe them. And then you can see 20 commits where I attempted to make it work, and I failed each of these times. So now I believe them, that Heroku is really not supported. It really is. It really is, Kanye. I don't know why. I don't know. MacBooks, they can't get online. So what's next? I want to be able to embed vaults. I want people to be able to throw them up on their site, especially for news outlets, right? Like Mashable and BuzzFeed, whatever. I want them to be able to share a vault instead of a screenshot. It's kind of the motivation for the app. I want to do this with JavaScript instead of an iframe. Twitter does it with JavaScript. It's more secure, a little faster. And again, the whole point of this app is to stretch some limits of my own skills. I want to store videos, because people can tweet videos. I don't know how I'm going to solve that one yet. That's going to be interesting. User testing has shown that people want to append to a vault. So you've captured a really funny rant from someone, and then it's still going. They say something else. You're like, oh, that's related. I want to add it. I want to add it. At this point, you'd have to create separate vaults for all those things. So I want to listen to my users and build that feature pretty soon. I want to replace that long pole with something that's socket related. I've used Pusher in the past, which is good. There are a few different solutions. I would like to extend this to be able to vault things that happen on Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat. Snapchat is a joke. That wouldn't make any sense. I think this next one is the coolest. I want to build API endpoints into my app so that then I can go and I can build a vaulter bot that uses the streaming API. So let's say we pointed at one particular handle. I'm going to throw Kanye West out there as an example. So it gets every tweet that Kanye posts, and then this thing could hit something that will create a vault, say once a day, and get everything. And that way you don't have to stay on top of it quite as much. And maybe start auto-generating these bots based on things like Twitter relevance. If something is trending, just go and fire off a bot to start creating vaults on your behalf. Browser plugin for reaction speed would be cool. So right now, if you see a tweet and you're like, oh, I need this permanently in my life for the rest of my life, what you have to do is go and log into StreamVault, create the vault. It might be gone by then, right, if it's really bad. The browser plugin would be cool, where it can interface with twitter.com, and you can go and create a vault right from there. Has anybody built browser plugins or extensions? Dang it, me neither. Native apps would be cool, Android, iOS. It just kind of feels like that's the way it should go. I picture a lot of mobile use for this. And Elixir would make a lot of sense. As many concurrent operations as this thing has to deal with. That would be a really good platform to rewrite it in. Is it legal? I don't know. Maybe? No, it is. It is. I found this out before I started building it. There's an app called PolitiWhoops that does the streaming API, gets a whole bunch of tweets, runs it again, and says, are any of them missing? If they're missing, they were deleted. So therefore, they're interesting, and they get surfaced. And Twitter about a year and a half ago said, no, and they shut them down. So PolitiWhoops went away. And then January 1st of this past year, they reversed their decision and said, you know what? Freedom of speech, we think that's cool. You should be able to do this. So I had that information before I started building this, and I was like, all right, yeah, should be cool. Is it open source? No. Boo, it should be open source, right? I have a few reasons why I'm not doing that just yet, but I would love for you to be involved. Like I said, I've had some contributions recently from other developers, which is rad. 2 ways you can help. One is vault that stuff. Use it. Did I misspell stuff? StreamVault.io. So please, get out there, use it. It's up, it's running. And give me feedback. I'm on several Slacks, and I'd be happy to give you my email address. If you're a developer and you want to work on it, let me know. I'll give you access to the repo. You can send some PRs. The backlog is really long right now. There are a lot of features, a lot of bugs. Some of them are small and easy. Some of them are big. So if you want to get involved, please do. I've got some thank yous. A lot of help in UX and UI from Mario and Haskew. Are they here? Bummer, I'd like to thank them. They gave me a really valuable feedback for this app. My sister is a designer. She's still in LA. She designed the logo for this. Thank you, Anna, for your contributions recently. And Alex, I asked him early on. I was like, okay, so I have this idea. I don't know if it's legal, and I don't know if it's moral. And he said, I'm pretty sure it's legal. So that was good enough, apparently. And I would like to leave you with the perfect tweet. StreamVault. Any questions? So the thank yous, like these people. The first one I talked to was my sister because she's my sister. And I said, I need a logo before I can stand this thing up. And I talked to Haskew at a Carbon 5 hack night. It was just, I wanted to show something that I was working on that was cool. And he's a designer. He just started interning at Bellhops, right? Really talented guy. And he did more with user experience than UI, despite going more into design. He's like, hey, you should consider this and that. Mario, I wish he were here. He has helped me a ton. Like the grouping interface itself, grouping by handle, which looks really good, and it makes it a lot more easy to navigate. He came in about halfway through the project. And yeah, he's excited about it, so it's great. And Anna, I just kind of roped in. I was like, I need help, please. And she was like, okay. And you're Alex. So. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So just last night, Anna delivered a bug, and we went through the whole tracker process. I've done kind of a bad job of putting all the information that needs to be there in the stories because it's usually just me. So I'm like, this isn't good, and it needs to be better, right? And she's like, what does that mean? So I need to get better about that as more developers start working on this app. Any other questions? Oh, and I should have repeated your question. He asked about the contributors and how they came into the process. Yes? Do you want to grab the mic? Yeah, we're streaming, so.
Hashtag or keyword?
That's a great question. He asked if we can vault based on hashtag or anything other than handle. And that is not the first time that question has come up. And right now you cannot. But it seems to me like it would be trivial to build, and it would add a lot of impact to the app. So I do have a story in the backlog to build that. I think that's a great idea. Any other questions? Yes. Do you mind hopping on the mic, or I can hand it to you?
I don't think the mic.
Okay, I'll just repeat the question. That's fine.
Are you running the request?
So they all happen in the background, and that's where Sidekick comes in. So when you make a request, when you create a vault, that all get shoved to this worker, and then you get redirected back to your Vault's index page, which looks like it's back there. So where you see all your vaults, you'll see a little spinning graphic while it's filling, right? And the background worker is working. And then your browser says, how about now? How about now? How about now? How about now? And then the worker finishes, and it says, good. And then your browser says, good. And then it shows it. So yeah, it's all background so that the web app can continue being fast for all the other users. He asked how often those are made. The long polling, I think the interval is like, I think it's 1 second right now. Background worker is always up and listening. So anytime somebody takes an action to create a vault, at that point in time, it'll go and hit the worker and say, go do your stuff. So it's always on demand. That makes sense? Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So he asked if new tweets are added to the vault after it's created. No. Once a vault is created, it's done. It's in a box. And that's it. That's all you get. If you want more, you have to create a new vault until I add the ability to append to a vault. So yeah, it's done. Its job is done. You all move on. That's a good question. Any others? Yes? He asked if I use all the extra JSON data that I'm storing, if I use that for anything. No, I don't. That's totally future-proofing. Like, hey, someday I'm going to want a feature that's going to need this really weird piece of geo data on the tweet. So it's there just in case I need it in the future. Another very good question. Thank you. Yes? So Anna asked if Twitter changes the way they respond to an API request, does my Sinatra app that mocks Twitter respond to it? Does it update itself? No. No. If Twitter changes something, I have to go and change my Sinatra app. It is completely agnostic to the outside world. Yeah. If my response, if my actual thing out to Twitter broke, yeah, my test would not catch it. Yep. That's a good question. Yes? Okay, so he's asking about querying the data. And what I have in place at this point is a very simple and basic, the Elasticsearch implementation. I would definitely like to dive deeper into that so you can get much more useful data out of it for research, like you said, because you could totally use this in a whole bunch of different ways. This is kind of the funny way, but you're right. There are a lot of research, you know, things like crime or predictions or things like that. Absolutely. It would be really useful to extend that Elasticsearch so that you can do different types of full text searches on that data. It's a good question. What's that? Yeah, sure. PR? Any other questions? Yes, Joel. So yeah, when this thing actually starts getting some users, what is my S3 bill going to be? I don't want to know, and I'm going to ignore that for now. That's something that I'll deal with when it comes up. Yeah, that could be an actual problem. The thing is, Twitter does a good job of resizing most of their images. I don't know if the entities are or not, but I assume they are because they come from Twitter, right? So Twitter faces this same problem on a much larger scale. So my assumption is that they are kind of reasonably sized images. Now when I start looking at video, then I'm in serious trouble. Any others? Yes? Sure.
I tried to Google it when I saw it.
Yeah, you know what? It's okay in terms of trademarking. Yeah, as long as they're disparate enough. I did do a lot of searching on the URLs and things like that. StreamVault.com was taken, but not by anything that I should be concerned about. So yeah, I felt totally comfortable moving ahead with an I/O with, yeah, you're going to be hard-pressed to find anything that's not completely esoteric. And generally, it's OK as long as there's not competition. Yeah. Any others? I really appreciate you all being here. StreamVault.io, check it out.